Hello, Turning Inward podcast listener. You're in for a real treat today because I have a really easy conversation with Michelle Sammons. She's an intuitive spiritual coach. And we talk at length about giving, receiving, and offering our gifts. So before you get into that juicy conversation, I want to take a moment to say thank you. I've been on the journey in public for a few years now, and the Turning Inward podcast has evolved over those years. And I just want to say thank you for journeying with me, for your commitment to this path, and for listening. Towards the end of the year, there's a lot of energy around that might be pressuring you to set goals, expectations, put some markers in the sand. One of the things that Michelle and I talk about is the direction that you're going when you set these goals, when you're making these decisions, when you're being conscious about your choices. So I hope that this conversation informs you as you sit in that space and decide what it is that you want to feel, who you want to become, what you want to do, be, or have. I wish you love, I wish you joy, and I wish you heart. Courageous, aligned action with your heart. If I can support you in any way, reach out to me at viviancarrasco.com or visit my digital home, viviancarrasco.com, and check out the Work With Me page. Happy New Year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, however you celebrate this magical season of love and of giving and receiving. Happy, happy, happy joy. Hello, Turning Inward listeners. Today I have with me Michelle Sammons. Michelle is a beautiful soul. She actually gifted me some of her time probably a few weeks ago, and it really touched me. So I want to be completely transparent. I feel a little nervous about this conversation. I'm usually not. So that's cool. So as I was thinking about our conversation, Michelle, what came to mind, or actually what popped into my heart, was the idea of giving and receiving gifts. And what you shared with me a few weeks ago was the gift of your time. And so I just wanted to go into conversation about that topic in general and kind of see where we end up. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, one of the things that I love about giving and receiving, I find that I'm a much better giver than receiver. And I think that's true for a lot of people. For me, how it works is it's almost like when my energy or my gifts start to kind of fill me up, that's when I want to share them with someone else. So it's that old adage of when the cup runneth over for me. Mm-hmm. And so then it's just kind of like overflow, and I'm ready to help someone else or give to my time or my energy or just really kind of what they need at the time. So that's how it works for me, is when I'm ready to give, I know it in my heart, mm-hmm. and I tune into that space. And honestly, I try not to give until I'm in that space, because then the giving becomes depleting of my energy. It's got to be a real, I'm already full up, and then the giving is allowed. That's kind of how it works for me.
That's really insightful, because I just learned that recently, probably a few years ago. So what was it that sort of brought you to that awareness of it's better for me to give when my cup runneth over? Because so many of us do exactly what you said. We give and give and give until our bucket's empty. And then, all sorts of things come up, like maybe resentment and anger and that sort of thing. So where did you learn that, or how do you remind yourself about that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, because it took some time, and really it took just tracking it. So noticing when I was excited to give my time and energy and when I wasn't, and then kind of asking myself, well, why did it feel good here and why did it not feel good this time around? And then I've also had to track the tipping point, so to speak. So it feels great to give, and then I reach a certain point and I know I've done enough. And if I go beyond that marker, then it starts to feel depleting again. Mm-hmm. So it's really just being aware and paying attention to kind of your own emotional valve is what I have found. And it just takes practice, really. And I'm not perfect at it. So sometimes I overgive and you do get depleted. And you have to, for me, I have to find some quiet time and go away by myself and really just recharge my own battery. And then I'm kind of ready again. But you have to pay attention to where you are, I think.
Yeah. And what I heard in what you were saying is this. It sounded like sort of a natural flow of, come back, refuel, then go out and give and come back and refuel, and knowing, like, becoming intimate with your own space and when you're in what stage.
Yeah, that's how it works for me. And it's just a going inward of where is my energy? How full or low is it? And it's just noticing. It's the simple act of noticing. And you have to get quiet. I have to get quiet sometimes to do that. Because if I'm out in the hustle and bustle, my automatic habit is to want to give, is to want to help, is to want to, put myself out there. If there's a need, oh yeah, let me jump in. But I have to pull myself back and be like, okay, is this really what I want to do? Am I really up for it? And ask myself those questions. And sometimes, depending on the subject, it happens so fast, you can hone in on it right away. And then sometimes if it's a bigger ask, I sit with everything before I say yes anymore. So I sit and I meditate on it and I look at the ask and I check in with myself.
Yeah. And what I sort of noticed in what you were saying is it depends, or I think your words were, and I should have wrote them down. I have 2 pencils, one in my hair and one is where is it coming from? And what I heard in that, tell me where I'm wrong, is the ask, is the me wanting to give coming from maybe a social or a cultural or this, somewhere different than where, like, a genuine heartfelt, giving without an expectation of receiving. Is that what I heard in the distinction that you were making there?
Yeah, I think you have to be aligned with the ask. I read something recently and I wish I could remember where, but they were saying, the world needs everything. So the world is always asking for everything, but what do you want to give? And that's really helped me hone in too on how I like to give and the amount of time I like to give, how long I have the energy to sustain something, to kind of ask those really personal questions so that it doesn't edge over into resentment or overwhelm or any of those other things that you, on the edges of you going past your boundary. So I think those are just clues that you've gone past your own boundary of what you're willing to do. And I think it's good to have boundaries on that stuff. It's part of just taking care of your emotional well-being. That's knowing what you can do and what you can't do is huge.
And one of the things that I actually went through as I was learning to tune in, like you said, on where am I giving from and when am I ready to give, is that when I gave before I was ready, or when it wasn't coming from that sort of deep place inside of me, it didn't seem to end up where my intention was holding it. And when I waited to give from that space that you're talking about, it seemed to be even bigger.
Yeah. It has a bigger ripple effect, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Intention plays a huge part in why you're agreeing to do something or why are you wanting to give. That's huge. And really knowing the answer to that question.
Now, you mentioned a little while ago that it's a little more difficult to receive.
Yeah, for me it is. And I think a lot of folks, especially people who they're big-hearted by nature. It's the natural inclination is output. And so to then allow that same love and attention to come back to you can feel a little challenging. So I have to remind myself that it's all reciprocal and I've got to let it come back to me because that's what refuels me. So allowing love and abundance and friendship and all of those good things to come back to me is what then just helps to refuel my own battery. So I have to really tune into that and notice why I want to close up or not receive giving. So, and that can be challenging sometimes, I think, for the people who are natural heart opening, if you will. They're just, that's their inclination to give. Yeah.
So what are some of the practices that maybe come to mind, or things that were milestones for you that helped you to open? Because my hunch is that the beautiful listener on the other end of our conversation is going, I don't know how to receive,
Yeah.
and I want
Yeah.
to, but I don't know how.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. And for me, again, everything in my life is practice because it's just the tool of awareness is such an important part of my life now is noticing when someone wants to do something nice for me and noticing my initial reaction to it. And for me, what I have to do is literally open to the experience. So that means opening to the love that's being offered, opening to the energy that's being offered, and opening to the gesture that's being offered. So my habit that I've had to overcome is like, oh no, you don't have to. It's okay. That would always be my initial phrase that I would throw out to folks. And I really had to be like, no, I had to talk myself about it. Like, it's okay to receive. It's okay to accept love. It's okay to be on that end of the cycle of things. And when you do, it's such a gift to the person that's giving. So it's like allowing them to have output and express their energy. And that initial reaction that I used to have of like, oh no, it's okay, it just stops everything in the tracks. And it stops their energy of giving and output. And so it's like, putting a cog in the wheel. It stops the flow. So it's really a gift to allow someone to give to you too.
That really
makes
resonates
sense.
and matches with my own experience of exactly what you said, of putting a cog in the wheel of the flow, because you're giving a gift by allowing them to give you. So it's logically, in our logical mind, it doesn't make sense, but it is both giving and receiving on both ends, is what I heard. Yeah. You said my life now, the jewel of awareness in my life now. Tell me a little bit about this distinction between my life now and maybe before this awareness.
Oh gosh, well, that's a great question. For many years, I just kind of bumbled through my life. Not that I didn't have direction, I did, but I would kind of take life as it was being thrown at me. And so, oh, this needs my attention now. Let's focus there without really kind of settling into what I wanted, what really truly needed my attention. It took some time to realize that I was being kind of pulled by life instead of really directing my life, if that makes sense. And I'm not real big on control, and because that can make you feel like you're gripping the steering wheel of life, because it is a ride, So if life is the car and you're on this big journey, it is a ride. But what I wanted to do was really be able to point in the direction that I wanted to go. And so allow my kind of gaze to go down this path where I was headed instead of, worrying about every little speed bump or off route or sign on the road, if you will. Yeah, so it was just awareness of how I wanted to live my life.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that you mentioned is the direction. In this season, we're recording in December of 2018. There's a lot of maybe mental chatter around just general society on setting goals and getting somewhere. But what I heard more in what you were saying is that this direction was more aspirational. It was more vision. It wasn't like focused on the outcome and how to get there, but just moving in the right direction. Is that what I heard?
So when I say direction, it's more heart centered. So for me, when I tune into what wants to happen next, or when I sit with something and decide what step I want to do next, I really feel it in my heart. And so I allow that part of it to kind of pull me forward. So I try to drop out of my analytical brain, because my logical brain can give me all sorts of great reasons why I should do something or not do something. But that's not often what my heart is telling me. So I'm learning to allow my heart to provide the direction for me, and then let my logical brain kind of fill out the specifics and details of it. Our mind is a fantastic tool, but it's also a tool. I'm really learning that it's not the part of me that I want to be in charge. So that's kind of how I sit with it, is your heart always knows what you want to do. It's always giving you feedback. Yeah.
That's fascinating, Michelle. And I was recently reading a book that actually talked about the neuroscience of the relationship between the heart and the mind. And it was saying that the heart actually gives the mind more information than the mind gives the heart. So it's feeding information up to the mind, whereas we might think, right, that the mind, because again, but that was fascinating to me. And what I wanted to ask you is, how do you feel the difference between what your mind, how do you distinguish between where that information is coming from when you say you feel it in your heart?
Yeah. So for me, it is, if it's a decision, I'm like, someone's asked me to do something and I'm trying to decide, what I do is I find a quiet space to sit. I close my eyes and I gently go inward. And so when I go inward, I usually take a couple of like nice, deep, clearing breaths, kind of settle into my bones, if you will. And then I'll, with the question kind of like out in front of me, almost like if it's a person out in front of me. And then I'll just notice kind of where I light up. Like, do I seem to have a lot of mental energy? Do I have a lot of energy going on in my head around this, in my brain? Or, is my heart opening up to it? Or is my heart constricting around it? And these are really body sensations for me. Like, I'll get an expansion feeling where my whole chest kind of wants to open up to it, or I'll get a closed in feeling where it's almost like I kind of go concave, if you will. So those are all clues. And then I'll begin to ask specifics of it. So I'll ask it like, if there's fear around it and why, or if it's just really not for me. And I start to tease those things out. And that just takes some practice of sitting and being willing to kind of open and feel, and then noticing when you're in your head about it, and just breathing and being like, okay, no, let me get kind of more neutral about this subject and see what it has, what messages it has.
I love the word that you just used, neutral. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and I used the metaphor of the stoplight, at an intersection. And that if you feel that the sort of red, anxiety, anxiousness, whatever red symbolizes for you, you bring it down to yellow and then green before you go, before you decide, before you move forward. And that's what I heard. Maybe my green is the same as your neutral. Like, is that?
Yeah, well, that's a great analogy. I love that. So, yeah, so if you have a decision, for me, there can be anxiety about it, or there can be excitement about it, because I can also get really excited about an idea pretty quick. And so when I let go of those kind of initial rushes, and I really want to make sure that this is something I want to do, I have to get neutral in order for the messages to come in. And so, yeah, it sounds like your green is my neutral. I would say so. That's a great metaphor. I love that.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about giving and receiving. And the third word that sort of came up as I was looking forward to our conversation is the idea of our specific gifts. So I know that you've launched a new program recently, and it's your gift that you're giving the world. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the new program that I recently launched is Intuitive Spiritual Coaching, which is kind of a combination of all the skills that I've learned over the years, which has been fascinating, because my intention with this program was, and because this happened to me, and so I'm offering it to folks where I used to be, is when I became interested in spirituality and all the metaphysical stuff, and I read tons of books and went to workshops and lectures and conferences and all sorts of really great things. But I had a hard time bringing it home to my life. Like, how do I apply this? And how do I bring the sacred into my life? And how do I make this really a part of my daily existence? And so it took many years to figure that out. I mean, lots of dead ends and turning around and stumbling blocks and all of that good stuff. And so what I found is that I really needed help. I needed mentors and teachers myself that could help me bring it home. And so, again, when your cup is kind of full, then you want to give it out. And I have figured this out figured it out. I'm still always figuring it out, aren't we? And so, but I'd like to help those folks who are kind of in that position now, because there's lots and lots of people out there who are kind of awakening. They're more than just this human body, and yeah, they're just looking for transformation, and they're in these transitional phases, and they just don't know what to do. So, yeah, that's what my new program is about. Yeah.
Speak a little, because this is actually something I had written down, so it's interesting that you use this word. I was curious about the way you use the word transformation. How is transformation different in your experience from just seeking change? So if someone's seeking, because I believe in the same kind of thing. Like, so, we talked a little bit about social and society and distinguishing between whether I'm wanting this because of something else or because I'm tuned in, right? And it's coming from that heart space. And that's another sort of trend that I'm seeing is people seeking change, which is maybe a different outfit, a new pair of shoes. That's change, from where I am, a different house, a different husband, whatever it is that they're wanting to change on the outside. But the word I heard you use was transformation. So how is transformation different from change?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that. So one of the things that I've noticed is transformation happens on the inside, and change, all those outward manifestations, happen out here. Now, some people could say, oh, well, I changed on the inside and then the outside changed. But typically what I find is that when you're ready for transformation, my experience with it is that something on the inside is off, And so you're wondering, why do I feel off? What's going on here? And what's not working? And then when you start to kind of really tune into that stuff, that's when you look at what's working and what's not working, what you truly want, and the direction you want to go. And what I have found for myself is there's often transition before transformation. So it's almost like on the other side of transition is transformation. So these transitional spaces that we don't like because, we're not really in one world or the other. I mean, it's kind of like being, an engaged person. You're not really single anymore, and you're not really a married person. These transition phases make us uncomfortable because we don't know what's coming next. But if we can just open to the magical possibilities that are out there, then that's when the transformation happens. And it happens because of our readiness. And then it also happens, and I'm going to use an old-fashioned word, because of grace. There's a meeting of the two, your readiness, and then the universe's grace just comes in, and that's when transformation happens.
I love that you brought up this liminal space in between. But tuning into that readiness, in my experience, what does that feel like? Because mentally we tell ourselves we're not ready for that new thing. Like, when is that sort of tipping over point? Sort of like that you feel that readiness?
Yeah. Well, gosh, for me, I've usually got a good fight in me first. So there's a whole lot of resistance that goes on first. So that's my pattern. So I resist. And then honestly, I get tired of resisting, and surrender happens. And then it just takes over. So it's kind of really trying to figure it out on my own and stay in control with all that fear and resistance, and then just releasing that and being like, it's almost an I give up feeling for me. Like, I don't know, I'm going to give this to you. And so when that happens, there's just this big space that opens up, and you kind of have to let go of all the think you should or all the things you think you shouldn't. When you let go of all that stuff, it really does create energetic space for things to drop in. But you got to create the space. And sometimes you don't even know that you want the space till you go through the transition part, till you put up the fight. I mean, that's part of the process sometimes. It's been part of my process. And now I just know when I'm in resistance, and I try hard not to beat myself up about it or rush it. my tendency is also to want to rush through the resistance and the fear because I don't want to experience it. But that doesn't really serve me either. So I try to just wade through it, if you will. And then there's always another side. Yeah.
So you mentioned that part of your pattern or practice, and I don't remember what language you used, but you said figuring it out myself. I see that in the folks that I serve too. There's this, I've tried to figure it out myself, and maybe an acceptance or grace comes in and says, this isn't something for me to do alone. As human beings, we belong with each other. What do you think it is about us that makes us try to just sort of figure it out ourselves or do it on our own? Or what is it that's taking us from that sort of intrinsic nature to find a mentor, find support, be in a community, and instead figuring it out on our own? Because I see that pattern in myself too. So I just want to say.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that. So when I look at that, what I see is we really think that we're solely human. We think that we are skin and bones and all this stuff that we drag around with us. But truly, what we are is this gigantic soul inhabiting a human body. And we tend to forget that big energy part of us. And along with that big soul that we are, come a whole host of beings that are at the ready to jump in and help. We all come with this gigantic support staff that we've tuned out because we've just really believe we are these individuals, these singular bodies, and that we're mostly mind. And, we've just kind of bought into that idea. And when we leave out the essence of who we are and leave out all of that energy support that comes with us when we're human, it feels flat. You can feel very flat. So when I reach out for support, the first place I reach out is to all of to my essence, to my soul self, and to all of what I would call my vibe tribe. I reach out to those folks first. And then they often point me in the direction of, a program, or that's when the synchronicity starts to happen. You read online about something, or the right book drops in your hand, or, you meet the right teacher at, in a store or wherever you happen to be. That's when it's almost like the physical world can support the energy world.
I don't know where I heard this, but this was years ago. I believe the same thing. We have the support there, but we have to ask for it. We have to allow for it. And that was something that really shifted for me is it's there, but they're not going to help you without permission, without you asking, without you, opening the invitation. Is that, so tell me more about that. Like I don't remember where I got that from, but is that something that also resonates with you, or where are you in that?
Yeah. So for me, how I find the beings that work with me, they are, they're just full of love for each of us. I mean, there is love just abounds. And we tend to cut ourselves out, off from even that natural flow of love that's being offered. So in that gesture, they always have your well-being at heart, So I have found that my vibe tribe remembers some of my original intentions before I even came into this body, kind of my broadest intentions. And so they're always helping to remind me of that. And that's kind of part of that heart pull. I mean, that's what's pulling you towards those biggest, broadest intentions that you had for this lifetime. And then what I also find is that, because we have free will, we can really decide on the specifics and the details of how we want this life to look. And so they're very helpful about, pointing you to those directions too. So you want to live in a certain place, and they'll kind of maneuver that for you, or they will drop clues, or it becomes like a fun game, and it becomes tandem where you can co-create. So I think you have to be open to it. You have to be ready for all of that too. So
how do you know if you're open or ready?
Yeah, well, some people are just, so everybody has a vibe tribe. Everybody has a support staff. And your support staff, whether you're aware of them or not, is always loving you. And a lot of people will call it they're open to it, but they don't call it that. So they'll say, oh, I have great gut instinct or woman's intuition, or you hear about moms just knowing something about their kids, or you hear people kind of reference these things in a secular way that makes it comfortable for them. It's all the same thing, really. You're tuning into that intuition, you're tuning into that support, and you're just using it in a way that you're most comfortable with. And we all have different levels of being comfortable with that kind of stuff. So,
and I've experienced the levels of my comfort expanding and opening. In my tradition, we pray for intercession from the saints and from the Virgin. And, so that's part of my vibe tribe. But I also remember, like, mentally, when I was looking for mentorship in a specific capacity, I would look for, I actually had this invisible, I want to say tribe, but it's actually a council. And it was Mother Teresa, and it was Eleanor Roosevelt, and it was, some other figures, because I wanted a certain level or certain type of, because I had read about them, and I said, these are virtues or these are gifts that I want to develop in me. So I would do that, right? So I've seen myself open to different things. And now I have, I guess, a council of grandmothers that I refer to, which includes my real genetic grandmothers and also grandmothers from, I guess, way back when.
Yeah. I love that you bring up your religious tradition too, because that was one of the first places that I opened to it. So I'll give you a little bit of history. I'm from the South, and so I grew up as a Southern Baptist who did not, I didn't grow up with, saints and ancestors that interceded for you, and I didn't have that in my culture. And then I married a Catholic boy. So, and I loved that. It just so resonated with me that they prayed to saints and that they prayed for their dead. And I just, oh my gosh, I've been missing this. So that was part of my evolution, was opening to that. And then I became really interested in, different indigenous cultures that kind of do the same thing, like the Rapa Nui and in the Easter Islands, they prayed to their moai, who were their ancestors. And so I became really just keen on learning about different cultures that had these connections. That was part of my process too, was gradually opening to all of this. Then really getting to a readiness point, and grace just came in, and where I could see, my soul self and my vibe tribe clearly. And then I began to see others clearly and could really tune into all of those different things. And so I think it's like that for a lot of people. It's just a gradual opening. And just, again, not understanding why you're curious about something, but just following it anyway. Why not?
Curiosity is one of my favorite things. Yeah, following your curiosity.
Yeah, it's the key. The work that I do, it's one of the keys to my life. I ask tons of questions. I'm like the ultimate questioner. I'm always wanting to know, well, how does this work and why does that work? And just being open to what might come in. Yeah.
Earlier you said, and I wrote this down, open to possibilities. How do we open to more possibility?
Oh gosh, this is something I'm always working on, because just like most folks, I used to be really scared of the unknown. Like, I wanted to know where I was going and what was out there and what was going to be there when I got there. And I wanted a plan. And I really had to adjust my mindset and reframe the unknown as open possibilities, as just a wide space of potential. And when I meditate, that's how I see it. I see the energy create forms that are potentials that we could focus on if we choose, and then draw that into our lives. So as I sit with that more and more, it really helps to calm the part of me that freaks out about the unknown. Because when I sit and I look at the energy, we get to decide what we focus on and where we put our attention, and that's what gets drawn out of the field. So, we do have a little bit of control there of what we manifest. And so just seeing what is ready to be manifested, what still just needs time to kind of percolate, is really a lot of fun. It's part of the game of being human, of getting to create our lives that we have here.
I agree with you. And you said that we get to decide. But the other part of this being human are these drives, so I talk a lot about, and I'm aware of two things. One is a negativity bias. Neuroscientists say that we are like Velcro on positive things and Teflon on negative things. And that we're also have this tendency to have like confirmation bias. What we decide is what we see. So it's a different way to say what you've said. But if we, speaking for the listener, if we don't like what we're seeing, if we don't like the choices that we've made, what are some steps for me to choose more possibility, to be more open, to draw in what I really want, not just what I'm scared of? Because that's the big shift that happened for me all those years ago was this embodiment, this deep knowing, right, to my bones, what the difference was when I was moving away from my fear. And if all my intention and all my focus was just in not getting that, not doing that, being afraid and just moving away from fear. And the shift, the magic that opened up for my life happened when I started intentionally moving towards my joy, intentionally following that curiosity. I don't know how that happened, but I know that that's what happened, is I changed direction.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. That's a great description of kind of my experience too. So when I was sitting with things that I did not want, and your attention is like a magic wand. So what you really focus on is just going to grow. And so even when you're looking at something you don't want and you're saying, I don't want this, and I want this, and I want this, you're feeding it your energy, whether you realize it or not, because your attention to the problem or the situation is just going to keep drawing it into your life. And so for me, it's hard to switch from I don't want that to I want this. It's almost like abrupt, it feels like, on the human system. So for me, I have to almost let the what I don't want recede into the background. So what I imagine is, so when I sit and I close my eyes and I'm looking, I'm going to use a thought, like a specific thought that you don't want to keep in your energy field. I imagine that thought, and I imagine it putting it on the outside of my circle of my energy. So it's not gone. It's on the edges. And on the edges, I can create enough space between me and that thought that I don't want. There's enough space there that just lets me breathe a little deeper. It lets me kind of come back to neutral. So that way, for me, it takes several tries at this. So I have to put the thought, for example, out on the edge of my energy field, find neutral, and just sit in neutral for a while. And maybe that's all I can do that day, is just be neutral with it. And then you kind of work with that practice for a little bit. And then you'll just notice when you're inclined to adjust your attention to what you do want and what thought brings you joy. But it's almost like you have to find neutral in order to switch gears. And without kind of just giving yourself that a little bit of space, I think it brings you back into balance before you can move in the direction that you truly do want. Does that make sense?
It does. And the way that my mind was framing this is actually, for me, giving the thought form, like making it an object of some kind, and it symbolizing that thought that I'm having that I don't want. And then visually seeing it step back. That's probably how I would incorporate that practice.
Yeah. And what I've experienced is that will eventually dissipate. So it almost starts to look kind of like fog is taking it over. It starts to kind of just start to dissipate into the mist. And I'm not going to tell you that it'll go away, because if you put your attention back there, it'll start to solidify again. But if you allow it to dissipate and just be there, but you're not feeding your energy to it anymore, it'll just kind of stay in neutral. And then you can really ask yourself, what do I want to feed my energy to? And then that's where it starts to get fun, because then you're, creating with purpose. And that's what we all kind of came to do, is, to create with purpose and not by default. So that's a lot of fun.
Say more. Create with a purpose or create your purpose?
Yeah, no, to create with purpose. So
With purpose.
yeah, with intention and purpose and consciously to know that you have kind of a hand in your life. That's when life becomes really fun. And that's when it's almost like the universe kind of opens up to you too. So they're like, she's getting the feel of this. And now we have someone who's ready to play and tweak and mold. And yeah, and you don't so bogged down with all the junk. It gets to be fun.
So this is such an interesting experience for me because I feel myself in a different place. I feel myself speaking for the folks listening to us. And the image that came to mind is an experience that I had. We used to live in Germany way back when, like before internet days. And I remember being pregnant with my youngest and only wanting slippers that had a back and a specific color. And in Germany, I didn't have that many options, right? So I had slippers that were 2 sizes too big. They were the wrong color. They were the wrong shape. And I just remembered only wanting slippers the entire time I was pregnant. It was winter time. And then coming back to the United States and standing in front of a wall, probably at Target or Walmart, and literally dropping to my knees and overwhelmed because there were slippers of every color and every size and every style. And I was like, oh my goodness. So mentally, that's what's coming up as it's difficult sometimes to create with purpose because we don't know what to pick.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I love the idea of an abundance of slippers when you want slippers. That's a great story. Yeah, so when you don't know what to pick, for me, what I do is when I don't know what to pick, I just settle onto a feeling state that I want to experience because, everything I do in essence is to feel a certain way. So love or openness or heart-centeredness or whatever it happens to be. So then you just pick things that feel like that until you can keep honing and honing and honing and honing. So I don't think we always know our end destination, or if we don't know what we want, then you just settle on, well, what feels like this aspect now? So I try to bring it closer to me. So, if someone's trying to decide on a career, for example, and I don't know what I want. I just know I don't want to be in this job anymore. Well, then you start to kind of just do the things and pick the things that feel like, so maybe you want freedom. So what feels like freedom now? I start to kind of hone in on it that way. And then it gets clearer and clearer and clearer as you become more tuned into that energy, if that makes sense. And it helps make your decisions easier too, I think, because then if something doesn't feel like freedom, then that's not the career choice for you, So it helps to kind of weed things out too when you get really practiced at it.
So the conversation for me wants to go in 2 different directions. One is overall, I think we tune out of how we feel. We numb ourselves. We push away the feeling instead of allowing the feeling to give us information. And the second part is what I know from my own personal experience. But again, I feel like I'm speaking for the listener. It sounds like this takes a long time and I'm impatient. So I know I'm a human and I'm impatient, but I think overall, as all of us are impatient. We want it now. We get frustrated when it seems to be taking, and I have air quotes going up, too long, or, I'm wasting time or I'm losing time. Where are you with that? Or what can you offer for the folks listening in that want to tune in, that are turning inward, that are feeling that frustration or that numbness? So I've given you 2 things, Michelle.
Yeah. So let me address this one first because it's popping up. As a culture, we kind of have a time shortageness conscious going on, that we're rushing through things and we got all these to-do lists to check off, and there's a lot of pressure around time. So I have lots of stuff to say about this. So let me start with the first thing is that, really, I'm going to give you a really broad idea here. So, time and space really only exist in our reality, that we decide, okay, we're going to become human and we're going to play in this time and space place. So, because when I look at someone's soul aspect or their journeys, it's all happening now. So we get really hung up on clock time and calendar time when all we really have is right now. And I know that gets thrown around a lot, but it's true. So for me, how I like to think of my now and what I like to tell people about time shortageness, I don't care how you use your now. So meaning that if it feels good in whatever experience you are right now, maybe you're daydreaming and you're thinking about the future and what it could be like, and that feels good, I think that's great. Or maybe you're using your now by like remembering a past event, like your kids coming home for Christmas or something, and that wells you up with joy, then I think that's a great use of your now. If you're in your now and maybe you're cooking a fantastic meal for your friends and it feels good to, be actually doing something in your present, in your now, in the real time space now, I think that's great too. I just think my goal for myself is I don't want a thought or a fear or resistance to hamper this sacred bliss that's always being offered to me. Does that make sense? So we have this natural abundance of joy and well-being and what I call sacred bliss, and it's always available. And it's only with our thoughts or our fear of, oh my gosh, I need to rush, or I need to figure it out, or I need to hurry, or your doubt, or that is getting in the way of that natural well-being. So when someone, I notice when I do that for myself, when I get impatient or frustrated, it's because I'm too far off in my future. I'm worrying about something that's not even here yet. Well, if I'm going to be thinking about my future, then let's be dreaming about it. Let's be, putting our attention on something that really lights us up, because that's how you create.
Yes. And two things are coming up for me. One is from a scientific background, Anne Lamott says laughter is carbonated holiness. And our bodies literally, if we laugh, then we're open, right? We're feeling that. When we stop laughing, then we have to remember whatever thought was making us angry or sad or mad. So it's like we bring ourselves back to that thought, but we always have the freedom to co-create. I just wanted to reaffirm exactly what you were saying.
Well, I love the carbonated happiness, because that is actually a phrase that I use to describe people, the energy that I feel inside my body. It feels like champagne bubbles to me, or it feels like carbonation of a soda. That's how the energy feels to me. So I love that description that she used. I think that's fascinating.
So to give when we talk about, the time, space, and it being now and all the time, it's all together. One of the things that helped me to sort of understand that time and was my own creation is imagining or remembering. So this is for you, the listener, if you're going, what the heck? What are they talking about? I would remember times when time would go slow or time would go fast. So I thought to myself, if I have the power to slow down time or to speed up time, how interesting is that? So there is no pure hour, pure minute, and we joke, I was teaching yoga for a bit, and we had yoga time, because a minute in yoga time when you're in savasana, that's eternity, to be in complete stillness, for 60 seconds after an asana sequence. So if you're having a difficult time sort of latching or hooking on to what we're trying to say, imagine when you've experienced time differently. Do you have any other suggestions, Michelle?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. There's a gentleman named Gay Hendricks that's written a book called The Big Leap, and he talks about this too. And he uses that same example of, imagine going to the dentist and having a cavity filled. 30 minutes seems like forever. But, going to, a play or a show or a concert, 30 minutes goes by so fast. So it's our own perception or our own experience of what we consider time that either draws it out or makes it feel short and makes it feel open or compressed. And he also, to go back to Gay Hendricks, to circle back what we were talking about earlier, he believes in also this kind of natural well-being that we all have access to. And he calls it upper limit beliefs, that we get stuck on a set point of how we are used to feeling. And we will find what you mentioned, resistant thoughts to bring us back down to that if we are afraid to expand into more. It's an interesting way to look at it too.
Well, so I love what you just led into. If we're afraid to expand into more, if I'm listening right now and I want to do this, but I'm afraid, what would you say to me? How would you help me expand into more?
I would look at my fear and want to know why I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? You know, what thoughts are bubbling up that make, because usually it's a nest of thoughts, right? So it's a bunch of little bitty thoughts that are kind of making up a belief. And how that I see that usually in someone's energy field is it looks like a nest or like a ball of yarn. And just starting to get curious about that, using that tool and using your tool of awareness and asking yourself, like, why am I afraid? And what am I afraid of? And what do I think will happen if I open up to this? And we come up with all sorts of excuses for ourselves to keep us small and just, getting curious to why you don't want to expand into more. And I find that, especially when something's kind of close to you, a nest of thoughts that have been with you a long time, you don't see them clearly yourself. And you have to find a coach or a counselor or a therapist or something to kind of help tease those things out, just because they have some distance from it and they can sometimes see it a little more clearly than you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I'm talking to my people, I call that friction. You have to create friction. And that friction should be wherever you feel comfortable. And if you are sitting in that, I can figure this out myself space, sit there. And maybe that friction is just a journal, or maybe that friction is a voice note that you're saying to yourself. But there has to be some form of a mirror that's you guys can't see Michelle, but I can see Michelle, and she just made a face. I don't know if Dewey got up or what happened.
Yeah, but it is a miracle when you move some of that fear out. I totally agree with you there. We're blessed with these little bitty minor miracles all the time that allow us to be more and more to come closer and closer to our soul selves and to allow that merging more and more. And the only thing that keeps us from that openness is our own fear. It's our own bars that we put around us. So it's just knowing that and releasing them as you feel comfortable, So I really believe in that. My growth process has been gradual. I tease everyone that I'm a plotter. So I plod along and I work my stuff and I try to use my tools. And some people, they're not plotters. They want to break it all open at once. And I think part of it is just knowing your own style of growth too, and your own style of expansion. So you don't fight against that either,
Because what we do as a human is we compare our style to someone else's style. And maybe we like their style better than our own innate style. So I really want to draw attention to what you just said, knowing our own style, our own preference of how we move through growth, whether we're a plotter. If you're a plotter, I'm probably a drive forward, like get her done kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm learning patience, but I'm learning and I'll keep learning and I'll keep learning to allow those sort of questions to bubble up answers, to bring forth things. But I'm not naturally patient at that. So we have had a delightful conversation. When you think of these three sort of broad areas we've gone into, giving, receiving, and offering our gifts, are there any closing thoughts or insights or things that you would share with us around that?
Yeah. Oh, right. So I think I love how it's all kind of come into play, because I think that our gifts that we've received, that we decided to play with when we came into this human life, are what we are to give. So, and I like to explain to people that, when we came into this human life, we received our gifts, but we gave them to ourselves. So we're like, okay, so this is what we're going to contribute this time around. So then you get here and you really want to contribute. That's that heart pull. That's that yearning of wanting to give. And so you have to think that everyone else that's out here has that same want to give, want to contribute. So then it's also just part of our role to receive what they came to give too. So it's all interplay. It's all part of, I love how we're all connected in that way. So, I give to you, and then maybe you give to someone else, and then it's all like a chain, and then it circles back. And I think it's just beautiful how the universe set it up for us.
I agree. So, Michelle, if the listeners are interested in getting in touch with you, where would you direct them?
Yeah, they can find me at my website, which is michellesammons.com. And if they have any questions for me about what we've talked about here, I have a comment page, and feel free to ask me any question there, and I'm always happy to reply.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving your time, both to me a few weeks ago and today to all of the listeners for the Turning Inward podcast.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. And thank you guys out there for listening. We appreciate it.
If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.